So far our ifs have had either two options to select from, like in case for our income tax, in case of which you were either not taxed or paid some income tax, or sometimes they even had three options, like was the case, the last video's case, where you either had a correct answer for the number of Excel's rows, the number was off by less than 50,000, or was way off. But it turns out that if can even have, like let's say for instance, four options, or even more. And let's consider one of those. Let's say that our before tax income is $2,300. And now we consider a more common tax system, which is called progressive income tax. And in that case, the bigger your salary is, the bigger is the tax percentage that you apply. So, for instance, if your income is 2,300, you have to consider the first tax bracket, as it's called. So, if you were under the first tax bracket, under 2,000, you would have to pay no income tax. So this is similar to our proportional income tax system. Now, if your salary was between 2,000 and 2,500, you had to pay 20% on the amount that was over 2,000. So once again, we still are applying this tax-free first 2,000, but on the amount that was over 2,000, like in the case of 2,300, you had to pay 20% on that amount that was over. But now let's say that your income was 2,800. In that case, you had to pay 20% on the entire range from 2,000 to 2,500. And then on the amount that you were over 2,500, on that $300 by which you were over, you had to pay 25%, which was a higher percentage. So you were like in that tax bracket. And now the last option was, let's say your income was 3,200, and then, since you were the highest number, you had to pay 20% on the entire amount from 2,000 to 2,500. Then 25% on the entire amount from 2,500 to 3,000. And then you had to pay 30% on the amount by which you were over 3,000, which is this last 200. So that's how difficult the progressive income tax calculations are, and it turns out it's exactly as difficult as our Excel formula will get. So let's at first write out a few sums. Namely, we want to calculate what is the entire 20% from this 2,000 and 2,500. So let's write equals, we take parentheses, 2,500 minus 2,000, which is second tax bracket minus first tax bracket. We take the difference, which is 500, we close the parentheses, and we multiply it with 20%. And here it is. This is the entire tax that has to be paid. If your sum are over, you have to pay the entire tax on that difference. Okay, the entire second tax bracket would be calculated as follows. We write equals, parentheses begin, and we subtract from the third tax bracket, we subtract the second tax bracket, get another difference of $500, and tax it with 25%, which is the second percentage. And here it is. This is the amount. That's a higher amount paid on your next $500 of income. Okay, and now we can get going with a formula. And once again, let's enumerate this. This formula has now first option under 2,000, second option between 2 and 2,500, third option between 2,500 and 3,000, and the fourth option even over 3,000. So this formula has 4 options. We could automatically, or rather mechanically, remember that this means there is gonna be if 4 options are available, we are going to use 3 ifs, all like within each other. Let's start by writing the formula. Equals if, parentheses begin, and the first thing is really rather easy to check. We check whether the before income tax is less than first tax bracket, and in that case your income tax sum is gonna be 0, and that's all. And once again we've done the first option, and we're left with this time 3 more options. So we have to write a semicolon, and into the, this is the if, it has the first part, second part, and into the third part we have to write another if. If, parentheses begin, and now let's consider the option in case of which you are gonna be between the second and between the first. I mean, let's say that your income is gonna be 2,300 or something like that. 2,300. Then what you have to do is you have to check whether your before tax income is less than 2,500. So it's less than the second tax bracket. There is one thing that has to be underlined here. We're checking whether it's under 2,500. But we already know from the previous if that it wasn't under 2,000, because it would have been checked as 0 here. So if we're here, we already know it wasn't it wasn't under 2,000, which means that if we check that it's under 2,500, we automatically know that it's between 2,000 and 2,500. Okay, let's see what the formula is. The formula is still rather simple. We have to take parentheses before income tax minus 2,000, so we check how much our salary is over 2,000, and parentheses get closed. We multiply this over 2,000 amount with 20% and get our entire income tax. Still rather simple. Okay, now we've considered the first option and given the tax sum, considered the second option, given the tax sum. Now we're still left with 2 more options. The income between 2,500 and 3,000, and the income over 3,000. So there's still a bunch of options to go, 2 more options. So we have to write semicolon and another if. And now just to underline, this first if here has a condition and the formula, and the second and third if are both the third parameter. The word is parameter. It's the third parameter of that first if. Again, second if has the first parameter, which is the comparison, and the second what to do in that case. And now the third if is going to be entirely the second if's third parameter. Okay, let's start comparing. Now what we have to know is whether our income is under 3,000. So we write if before income tax is less than 3,000. So so again, when we're here, when we're in the third if, we already know that the income is not under 2,000. It's not between 2,000 and 2,500. So if we check whether it's under 3,000, and if it is, we automatically know that it's between 2,500 and 3,000. Okay, and now comes a more complicated formula. We have to see by how much our income exceeds is over 2,500 and tax it with 25%. So let's write parentheses. We do such a thing. Before tax income minus 2,500. We already know that it's over 2,500, so something's going to come of it. We close the parentheses and we multiply it. We pay taxes on that over 2,500 by 25%. And is that all for this part of the formula? No, it isn't. Because remember, when we were over 2,500, we also had to pay the entire tax for the amount between 2,000 and 2,500. So the call entire first has to be paid as well. And here it is. We took the tax on the amount over 2,500. We gave a percentage to that. And this entire first was the 100%, was the tax on between 2,000 and 2,500. It was a 20% tax on that, so a different percentage than the higher bracket was taxed with. Okay, and now we're at the very end of our formula. We have checked that our before income tax is not under 2,000. We've checked it's not under 2,500. We've checked it's not under 3,000. Thus, we automatically know that it's over 3,000. So we can automatically write the last option. It goes like this. We see by how much we're over 3,000. So we do parentheses, before tax income minus 3,000, which is the third tax bracket by which we exceed 3,000. On that amount we pay times 30%, which is the third percentage as well. And then of course we have to pay the entire amount on 20% between 2,000 and 2,500. And the entire amount of 25% between 2,500 and 3,000. So that's how it goes. And now we can close all the parentheses. Here is our formula and here is our result. And now let's go over it one more time. This is the first if. It has a comparison. It gives a formula if it checks out. And the second and third if are entirely the third parameter, the third part of the third if, of the first if, sorry. So the first if has the first part, second part, and the third part consists of all these second and third ifs. The second if has the first part, comparison, the formula, what to do, and its third part is the third if. The second if's third part. And the third part checks. Again, does the formula, and since the fourth option is now entirely left over, we already know we're over $3,000 a month. So here it is. This is the fourth option that gets written inside the third if automatically. Okay. And there is no doubt that the progressive income tax is rather much more intricate to calculate in Excel, as it's also more difficult to manage for a state.